Hello, class. Today we're going to continue our unit on leadership and management. And so we'll go through a lesson on leadership and management, and then we'll go over some reading to end. So today's reading is called Managers and Leaders. Are They Different by Abraham Zalesnik. So my first question is, or my first statement would be, business leaders have much more in common with artists than they do with managers. And so take a minute to stop right now to think about this statement. What does this statement mean to you? Why? How do you interpret it? What do you think about it? So, why would they have more in common with artists than they do with managers? And so, I would venture to say, or Abraham Zalesnik might venture to say that um, the artists will have a creativity, have an innovation, have a freewheeling way about how they perhaps may work, while managers may look more at structural types of things, operate in a sense of this is how things have been. So you want to make sure that you look at managers and leaders in perhaps different lenses in terms of how they view themselves, how they see their work, and all these types of things. And so why are we talking about the differences between managers and leaders? Why are we talking about how perhaps they might operate differently in business environments, right? So it starts with what leadership does and what leadership needs, and that is the ability to influence and have power over or with or for people. All right, and so this reality has brought the world to a point where they're worried about this risk. Okay, they're worried about too much power being in the hands of an individual, and so you might think of a dictatorship or something like that, where the ultimate power and even corrupt power is going to make seeing that leadership as a bad thing. And so, because there's this fear of the influence and power of individual leaders, people want to create systems where there is more collective leadership. Okay, and so schools of thought want people to see leadership and make it not in the power in the hands of the individual, but they want to put it in the power and hands of many or groups. And so that will reduce this power and influence in potentially corrupt or bad places. So why does this all matter, right? This matters because there has been an organization or an organizational shift where we want collective leadership over individual leadership, and so we need to judge. What do we think about this statement? What do we think about this thought? Is this something we agree with? And so, on the positive side, it goes to looking at the power of the group over the individual. And so, again, what this leads to, we'll have conversations about as well. But I feel like most of us can agree that power in the hands of many and spread out is a good thing, right? We want a mass of people, a society, of organizations to have widespread growth of power versus individuals getting more power, right? Thinking about the income wage gap, thinking about the concentration of power of nations, of corporations, and stuff like that. Most of the time, most of the conversation talks about how the concentration of power going to a more narrow band of people is actually a negative thing. And so all this conversation may lead us into places where maybe we didn't intend to go or might not want to go. And so, what has happened? And so, trying to separate power, trying to eliminate the individual powerhouse and break up that role into many different roles and to create layer upon layer upon layer of businesses where managers or leaders have to answer to different people to spread out this wealth of power, that can create bureaucracy, right? That can create someone who manages singular unit and has to report to others, right? So in reality, doing this seems to be developing managers versus developing leadership. And this is a problem in terms of if we are trying to actually develop influential, powerful, good leaders. So, what am I really saying here? So, I'm not. It may sound like I'm backtracking or saying both sides, and I would say you're right in the fact that do I want strong, powerful leaders to exist? Of course I do. Do I think there needs to be collective thought and group groups of people contributing to leadership? Of course I do, right? But how does this work, right? How do we accomplish this, right? Behavioral managers can accomplish this better than a classical manager, theoretically, right? So what kind of leadership are you creating? Are you creating leadership that wants to dominate and influence power over everyone because they want to retain power? Or are we talking about leadership that wants to collaborate and collectively communicate and to bring forth many, many ideas, the knowledge economy, and those kinds of things? And so the reason why we're talking about this is we have to understand the difference in how managers and leaders might think. Again, this is not the be-all and end-all of how they will think, but this is maybe an insight into how possibly they go about their business, their way of life, and how they think, to consider what they might want to do and why they want to do it, right? So for us to understand this, we need to look at a few characteristics. How are managers different than leaders in these 5 scenarios? In their personality, in their attitudes toward their goals, in their conceptions of work, their relations with others, as well as their senses of self. So how do managers think about these 5 things, and how do leaders think about these 5 things? Today we're going to talk about personality. The next lesson we'll talk about attitudes toward goals, conceptions of work, and relations with others. And the following lesson we'll talk about senses of self. So let's tackle this first topic: managers versus leaders in personality. So how do we think, or how do we conceive and consider managers in terms of how they view their personality? What is their personality like? And so managers typically, again, every statement I say today, this is I'll say a stereotype, perhaps, a generalization. And so of course not all managers are like this, and not all leaders are like this. But when we look at this in terms of a title or in terms of a role, you might consider this. And a good manager won't do all these things necessarily. A good leader won't do all these things. And so I'm just trying to dissect the 2 personalities, and for you to better understand how maybe you will operate, how your bosses will operate, and maybe how you should operate, taking the best from managers and the best from leaders. So managers, again, they emphasize rationality and control. Good thing, for sure. They solve problems. Again, good thing. They are reactive. Not as good of a thing, and we'll talk about why. And so let's read this quote before we tackle each of these 3 bullets. It says, it takes neither a genius nor heroism to be a manager, but rather persistence, tough-mindedness, hard work, intelligence, analytical ability, and perhaps most important, tolerance and goodwill. Okay, so for personality, we're talking about an individual who is going to be able to be part of a system that they understand, be part of this organization that has some controls in place that they can live within a structure. But they're also going to persist. They're also going to solve problems. They're also going to be very, very able to push through and do what they need to do, right? To be that bulldog that gets work done, that gets tasks done. The person that is going to be able to complete what is necessary in this moment, right? They need to be rational. They cannot be emotionally charged, right? They are reacting to situations when situations arise, right? They're solving problems as problems arise, right? So they are in their position to solve problems within their position, to control their situation, to ensure that what needs to happen happens. Again, all of these things are good. Nothing's bad about this, right? This person is the person that is going to get it done, right? So that's what this quote talks about, right? This is not a hero. This is not someone who people are going to laud about. This is someone who is able to go through what is necessary to get the job done, okay? And that typically will be persistence. That typically will be a toughness, right? And so that's important. But how is that different than how perhaps a leader may look at themselves, or how a leader's personality is? So leaders typically are a great person, okay? And we'll explore what this might mean in a minute. A leader is more entrepreneurial. They are a controller of others. Leaders are imaginative. Managers and leaders differ in how they think, what motivates them, and how they act. So when we talk about a leader as a great person, this great person is not defined by their role, whereas a manager more likely is more defined by their job position, by the title they have, what's described in their job description, right? That is what your job description says, so that's what you're going to accomplish. Whereas the leader it lives beyond that description because they're somewhat entrepreneurial, they're somewhat imaginative, they are someone who looks for different solutions, different ideas, sees a problem as an opportunity to fix things, sees this issue as something to be tackled, right? The entrepreneurial spirit of a leader is someone who wants to solve and wants to lead and wants to take a different step, because the same steps lead to the same problems and the same solutions. They're imagining different ways to think, right? They control others, right? So this sounds similar to a manager in terms of job, task, and orientation of work. But this leader is controlling others in their personality because they're grand. They're able to make people operate in a specific way. What it takes to develop managers may inhibit developing leaders, and the presence of great leaders could undermine managers. So pause for a moment here and think about what this statement means and what it says, and I'll repeat it. What it takes to develop managers may inhibit developing leaders, and the presence of great leaders could undermine managers. So what do you think this actually means? So pause for a minute, write something down, and we'll discuss. So if you examine this statement, it says that if you want to develop managers, the leaders that are part of that group might be inhibited. Why? Right? Because to develop the manager, you're developing systems of control, systems of regularity, developing to think in a specific way rather than the imaginative way, right? Telling them this is how things work, this is how we've always done them, and so this is what you need to learn, right? Trying to subdue some of that entrepreneurial spirit, right? Because the entrepreneurial spirit is going to challenge how things were done before. So the development of that manager may inhibit the leader in someone, potentially. Also, the presence of great leaders could undermine management, right? So what does this mean, right? If you're a great leader in an organization, personality-wise, you could still be working underneath a management level individual. And this manager may have the personality to keep things how they are, to react to things, to want things to be the same way, because that's what they were taught, that's what they know, what works. Yet you as the leader who works underneath that person sees a different way, is entrepreneurial, is willing to put themselves out there and challenge you. And so that great leader could undermine that manager's ability to manage. And so again, we're not talking about managers and leaders being better or worse, but they're different people who are doing and approaching tasks and problems and jobs in different ways. And again, I'm also not saying that managers can't be leaders and leaders can't be managers. But we have to figure out what parts of management skill set and what parts of leadership skill sets do we want to emulate or do we want to develop. Okay, so that was a very quick, short lesson on the personality of managers and leaders. And so going forward, I'd like you to do some reading. And so we have a reading package called Managers and Leaders, Are They Different? And what I want you to do is right now, I want you to read page 1 to 4 up to the end of Conceptions of Work. And so tomorrow, or the next lesson, we're going to be doing conceptions of work. We're going to be doing relations with others, and we're going to do attitudes. And so read that page 1 to 4 up to the end of conceptions of work. And so now we'll take a minute to talk about the independent book readings, and that's for homework. Thank you.